hearing Jesus teach. And then they said to him, John's disciples, like the disciples of the Pharisees, frequently fast and pray, but your disciples eat and drink. Jesus said to them, you cannot make wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them, can you? The days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast in those days. And he also told them a parable. No one tears a piece from a new garment and sews it onto an old garment. Otherwise, the new will be torn, and the piece from the new will not match the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins and will be spilled, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, desires new wine, but says, the old is good. I was, gotta get my voice straight. I think I'm okay now. I was thinking after last week that for the past several Sundays, my sermons have been maybe a little bit heavy on the theology side. Like I was talking about the apocalypse last Sunday and referring to words of Jesus about the coming of end times, and then referring to Revelation. And then the Sunday before that, I was quoting N.T. Wright, who's an eminent theologian, and talking about signs pointing to the kingdom. And I was thinking, you know, maybe I need to lighten up a little bit. Some people like that stuff and some don't. And then Monday morning, I opened the Church of the Brethren magazine Messenger, which some of you get, in which there's a copy back on the table that anyone can read for the whole church. The new one had just come in the mail, and I opened it, and there, lo and behold, is an article titled The Last Brethren Reminder. And some of you don't know what a Brethren Reminder is, probably. But if you've been around me very long, you know it's my little date book that is always in my shirt pocket. And you can see how worn that one is. They just don't make them like they used to. That one's about worn out. I've taped it together, and I think I can make it through December. But this article was titled The Last Brethren Reminder. And it was making the point that they are going to be discontinued. This is the last year. And I already knew that. And I was already kind of grieving about the loss of this trusted friend that was coming. I was trying to prepare myself, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But the article said, and I didn't know all of this, I did learn some things, that for at least 71 years, Brethren Press has been giving out this little pocket calendar free of charge to Brethren pastors. They know that because they found a 1947 edition in the Brethren Historical Library archives. So they know it goes back that far, maybe farther. But with the 2018 edition arriving last December, came a letter stating that that would be the last one. And the letter explained that printing costs had indeed increased, and in fact, most printers just didn't want to print this little pocket-sized booklet. They didn't do that kind of printing anyway, and they wouldn't do it. And also, with the advent of the iPhone and calendars on your phone, most pastors don't use the Brethren Reminder anymore anyway. And I thought, yeah, most pastors don't, maybe. But I have kiddingly said that I might be the last Brethren pastor to use that Brethren Reminder, but I can't give it up. Because, yeah, I've got an iPhone, and yes, it's got a calendar, but for me, it's a lot quicker and easier to pull this out, open it up, look at what's going on, than it is to find all of that stuff on my phone. In fact, the article said that Brethren Press had actually tried to discontinue it a few years ago, quote, but had to bring it back because of the outcry. It turns out that those who like the Brethren Reminder are true fans, end of quote. And so I guess that's me. You know, I'm a true fan. And although my family thinks I'm a nerd, because I always have my pen and my Brethren Reminder in my shirt pocket, at least I don't have a pocket protector, but those things are pretty much with me wherever I go. And I learned something recently. I did not realize they make men's dress shirts without pockets sometimes. I accidentally bought a couple of those. And so now I'm a lot more careful when I'm looking at shirts. I want to make sure they've got the pockets. But there's something about that Brethren Reminder that just seems to provide a measure of comfort and orderliness to my life. Where else can you just flip to the back page and instantly have access to the dates of Easter for the next 5 years? It's right there. Or it's also got the location of Church of the Brethren Annual Conference for as far into the future as those locations have been scheduled. And so this is important information. For me, for us brethren pastors it is. Most people don't care. But this matters. Incidentally, I have all of my Brethren Reminders carefully filed away from 1977 to the present, with this 2018 edition soon to be filed appropriately next to the others. And all of those are filled with the times and dates of meetings and events, and little notes and reminders to self on the sides, written in the margins. I used to record not just upcoming events, but then after the event happened, I would write in maybe, the hours I'd worked that day, the mileage, the other important things, or other notes, and kept all of that in those little tiny spaces. But finally, when I began at Mountain View, as we were just a tiny church and just starting out, in 2001, 01 is actually when I started, but I was still pastor at my previous church at Lebanon, and I knew I couldn't keep all of that for two churches in one little booklet. So I did go out and buy a larger booklet called a weekly minder, where I could write down the things I had done and my mileage and hours working and other significant things that become sort of something to look back on, kind of a journal, if you will. But still, I keep my Brethren Reminder to log my upcoming appointments and events. Now, I've been fortunate. This is one of my greatest fears, has been losing my Brethren Reminder. And I've had some close calls. But I've never really lost it. But I know a pastor whose wife accidentally ran his through the washing machine. He said he missed meetings for months after that. That whole year was kind of wiped out. I had a close call once involving water damage, but you can ask me later if you like. I won't go into that. But because of this termination letter that I received last year from Brethren Press, I knew that the end was near. See, we're still talking some apocalyptic here. And so I was planning for that. By October of this year, I began to shop for some equivalent date book that I could use. And so I bought the closest thing that I could find. I went to Staples and got this little book called At a Glance 2019. The thing cost nearly $20. Now I know why Brethren Press quit giving them out free. But, you know, this one's just not quite the same. It's a little bit taller, and I think it's going to stick out of my pocket a little bit, and that probably is not good. So I'm trying to figure out if I can maybe carry it in this hip pocket opposite my billfold, or how I can manipulate it. But I'm going to work on that. It just won't be the same. And, you know, I was thinking about all that, and it occurred to me it's probably ridiculous to become emotionally attached to a little book like that. And I really thought, you know, what's going on here? What's this all about? It's got to be more than just the loss of a particular date book that I've been using for a long time. I think it also kind of marks the end of an era. I get kind of nostalgic when I think about the old days and my Brethren Reminder, because years ago we Brethren pastors used to have meetings, and we would schedule events within the district and so forth, and all the pastors would pull out their Brethren Reminders, and we'd set dates for what was going on. And a lot of those folks aren't with us anymore. A lot of those were people who were mentors to me, and people I really looked up to, pastors that I looked up to. A lot of them have passed away, frankly, and most of the rest of them have retired. And so I feel a loss of more than just that little book. That little book reminds me of them. But change happens. Change is inevitable. It happens in all aspects of our lives. Some change is planned and anticipated, and some change is not. Some change is desired. Some change is feared, but we know it happens. Ecclesiastes 3 reminds us that for everything there is a season, and a matter for every matter under heaven. And we all experience change. We who are part of this church are aware that we have experienced many changes at Mountain View Fellowship over the past several years. We have been through an unusual number of losses, some of those by death, and also we have lost some long-term members who have moved away for good reasons, usually to be closer to their families, but nevertheless they've been losses. And then we've had some that have moved back home. Thanks, Rachel and Anton, all the way from California, back with us again, and bringing more children with you. That's great. And we've got quite a few new folks and families who are attending, who weren't even a couple of years ago. And another change right now in our congregation is that Regina is finishing her 3 years of ministry with us as associate pastor. She has resigned, and that's sad. But while it's a bit of a loss for us, it's also a gain for Sadie Rose Foundation, which is where her heart is and always has been. And we wish you well. And we know that it's going to be a boost to Sadie Rose Foundation that needs more of your time. And the good news there is that she and her family like our church so much, they're going to continue to worship with us. They're going to be here. So, good news in the midst of that change. Things change, times change, people change. It's part of the natural order of life. Advent is a season of change. In the Christian calendar, it actually marks the beginning of the year. It's New Year's. At the beginning of Advent, we're in the third week of a new year. Christian year, that is. In Advent, we anticipate, we prepare for that new thing God is doing in preparing to send His Son into the world. John says the Word made flesh. Sometimes we use the word incarnation. Word made flesh. God moving into the neighborhood. God coming to earth and dwelling with us. The prophet Isaiah anticipated that hundreds of years before, and quite a few verses from Isaiah are prophetic in talking about this one who is to come. And then here in chapter 43, Isaiah quotes God as saying, "Do not remember the former things or consider things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" And I was also trying to think of other scriptures that might apply here about newness and change. And this scripture from Luke 5 came to mind. People were listening to Jesus teach, and some of them were saying, "We noticed that the disciples of John the Baptist are always fasting and praying, and yet your disciples just kind of eat and drink and act like normal people. What's the deal with that?" And Jesus makes a comment about how the wedding guests continue to eat and drink when the bridegroom is with them. But it will not always be so, meaning that he would be leaving them as well. And then he told them this parable, kind of a parable in two parts. First, about the appropriate response to new things. Like if you have an old garment and you want to patch it, you don't go out and get a brand new piece of cloth, because the old will not really adhere to the new and it'll tear. And he says, same with putting new wine into old wineskins. Now, the situation here was that wine was often stored in the skin of or the hide of a goat or sheep. They would sew these things together, make a big container, and they'd pour the wine into it and allow it to ferment and go through the processes of finishing. And the problem here was that an old skin, like old leather, becomes hard. It won't expand. And if you put new wine in that's in the fermentation stage, that stuff is going to bubble and expand and ferment. And pretty soon, boom, the skin's going to burst. The seams are going to come apart. So, says Jesus, you need a new flexible container. You need a new wineskin for new wine. And so we're thinking, okay, Jesus, I can see that. What's your point? He gets down to verse 39. He says, no one, after drinking old wine, cares about new wine, because they say the old is good, or the old is good enough. How often do we say that? I don't need that new gadget. I don't need to change this. The old is good. I'm doing okay. And I think that's really human nature, at least for many of us. To change, we do so reluctantly. We do so slowly. We do so only when it's forced upon us sometimes. We fear the worst about change that is coming. And but it happened. So they quit making the brethren reminder. So what's next? Or maybe your job gets terminated. What's next? Or maybe you just graduated from school, from some class. You're not sure what's next. And maybe the year's coming to an end. Actually, it is. A couple of weeks. The end of 2018. What's next? Well, 2019 for one thing, but we don't know what that'll bring. It's new. A little scary. Maybe we look forward to a new thing. Maybe we don't. Maybe it'll be better than we thought. We, in Sunday school last Sunday in the Wired Word class, the topic was on motivations for doing what we do, why we do what we do. And Mona made the comment that she doesn't really like working in the nursery. You know, she doesn't really look forward to that. But hey, somebody's got to do it. But she finds that when she does, she just is blessed by being around those little kids. They're just a blessing. There's always something there that's joyful. And so we go forth sometimes reluctantly into something new, but so often we find that we are blessed in doing it in ways that we hadn't anticipated. So what will 2019 bring? We don't know. But we do know that whatever it is, it'll be new. It can't be contained in the 2018 wineskins. So we better get our new wineskins ready. We better prepare for those new things that are going to happen. Those new things that God is preparing in our midst. And so now it is Advent. We know that Christ is coming. We know He's coming anew into our world, hopefully into our hearts, into our lives. Even though He was born 2,000 years ago, He comes anew to us if we will receive Him. And so we can move forward with confidence into the future, knowing that God will be there. Whatever happens, God is there. God controls that future. And, you know, it just occurred to me, it's interesting that Christmas comes 1 week before the beginning of the new year. That seems appropriate somehow, because that means that Christ has been born. And as we enter that new year, Christ has been born. Christ is there and ready to give us guidance and care through whatever this new year may bring. So there's a lot more happening here than just the loss of my familiar brethren reminded. Who knows? I might grow to love my at-a-glance calendar. But I wouldn't be using it if it weren't forced on me because of the fact they quit making the other one. And that's often how it is. We don't try the new until we have to. We say, why try the new wine? The old is good enough. But is it really good enough? God says, I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive? All right. It is now time for us to share our joys, concerns, testimonies as we prepare to pray over those.
We knew we had signed up to be foster parents, but we never anticipated the arrival of a 5-week baby the week of my trial sermon here. And at that time, Lee's mom was still independent to this year needing assisted living assistance, just a steady decline with dementia. And in the past 2 years, Elsie, as you've heard over and over, times of prayer concerns for her, we are excited that she has been referred to UVA, to a pediatric allergy specialist, and pray for some just overall immune boost there. But thank you all for walking with us, for loving us. Also with Sadie Rose, that continues to just grow and the demand be there. 2 weeks ago, I had 3 families having 3 funerals in 2 days.
was good. We didn't have an accident.
We're very thankful that Emma was in a car accident on Friday night, which wasn't her fault, and fell over her vehicle, but she's okay, and we're very thankful for that.
I'm gonna do a little picking on Wayne. First of all, say happy birthday to you.